So today we have our final interviewee for our Women in STEM series. And first, I'm just going to let her introduce herself with her name and position and brief description of what she does.
Brief description. Oh goodness, I'm not great at brevity sometimes. My name is Stefanie Senior. I'm a sound designer. I sound designed Ada in the engine. And basically that means I'm responsible for all of the sound and music that you hear in the play, one way or another.
Awesome. So what does a sound, can you go more in detail into what does a sound designer do specifically for a theatrical production?
Yes. So with for something like a play, like Ada in the Engine is a play, it's a lot more about sound effects. I want to say, of course, but I do want to say there's also this sort of component of the sound system when you're in a space that, like the Waldron, that's flexible. You have to decide where to put the speakers so that everybody can hear what they need to hear. And that's a component that I think people forget about. They don't think about that as part of the design. But in the same way that putting lights where they need to go so everybody can see what they need to see is part of the lighting design, then speaker placement is also part of the sound design. In bigger houses, it's speaker choice as well, but it's not always an option in smaller theaters, and that's okay. But speaker placement, and like I said, for a play, it's going to be a lot of sound effects or music, or any original music you need to compose, something like that. So for this, it was somewhere between fully composed and created sound effects. The only thing in the play that I didn't write was the song at the very end, which was came with the play as original music by somebody else. But that it was also a choice to include that, because I could have chosen not to use that and write something else. So it was also a choice to include that, and then kind of work backwards from that to create the sound design for this play.
So since you discussed composing the music for Ada and like picking all the sound effects, what was your inspiration behind the sound design for the play?
I think it was a lot of it was kind of Ada herself and what she created. She created computer programming before computers existed. And so that was sort of aesthetically, that was a huge part of it. It was how do we create a soundscape that captures like how incredible this person was, and just how quickly her mind moved, and where it landed, and where what things it found important, things like that. And the more sort of concrete aspects of it were Kate and I talked. Oh my gosh, I can say her name, Kate. Kate and I talked about what it should sound like, and the ending song that we used as a piano piece. And so we really liked the idea of the piano as an instrument, because it was an instrument that Ada Lovelace played, but it's also an instrument that can be both modern and classical. It can be sort of it's an instrument we still play, and so it's something that can be kind of evergreen and works for the sort of time bendy kind of past plus present plus future that Ada and the Engine lives in. So
awesome. So what is your favorite thing about being a theatrical sound designer?
Oh boy. I think my favorite thing, I think I like how weird sound is. It's sort of a trite way of saying that, but I like how sound design is a fairly new field in the scope of sort of theater design media, right? And I like the ways that sound can affect a listener. They can, sound. I mean, we see it. I think the sort of more accessible understanding of that is like when you see a big dramatic moment in a movie and they put big dramatic music behind it, that's the movie telling you how to feel about that moment. Or they put emotional music behind something that is like sad, right? And that's the movie telling you how to feel. And so sound can really impact, it can sort of impact you in kind of non-tangible or maybe even imperceptible ways sometimes. And I like getting to play with the extremes of that and the oddities of that. Sometimes you can have a moment that's really emotional that gets undercut by what the sound is. Sometimes you can have you know what I mean? Sometimes you can have a moment that feels really ordinary, but then if you put a particular sound underneath it, it all of a sudden adds a lot of meaning to it. So I also like that sound can live in a lot of contrast in a way that I think not a lot of other design media can. So
what you say is so true. Like, if you've ever seen a reel of a movie before they put the sound effects and the sound like bites or like the music above it, it like right when they add the music to it, all of a sudden it like sets the emotion in place that the like that all of the creators behind the movie or behind the play want. And so without your job, it would be harder for the actors on stage to communicate the feelings and the emotions in the show because it's essential to telling the story.
Yeah, or sometimes it just enhances what they're doing. You know, like that was a lot of what happened with Ada in the Engine. The actors did such amazing work, and sometimes there were things that there were particular ways that they would say a line, or there were moments that would happen between them that were really compelling. And that's something something you can do with sound is like something you'll hear a lot in Ada in the Engine is just little piano notes, just single piano notes to highlight just a moment. Something happened here. Pay attention to that. That's going to be it's so sometimes it does. Sometimes it's something that informs the actor, and sometimes the actor informs the design.
How does science, math, and technology play into your role as a sound designer? I know you already kind of briefly touched on that, but if you could just go into more detail, that would be awesome.
Great. I will do my best because I was not a good math student or a good science student. Jokes aside, truly, a lot of sound is about physics. I tell people this all the time. Right? Sound moves through space. So it is, that goes back to speaker placement. Sometimes speaker placement is, how far away can this be, or how close does this need to be to reach the most people? And that's rooted in physics. It's I guess a lot of the sort of back end things are like science mathy, right? Like the angle at which the speaker hangs is important because again, its sound is so directional, and speakers can be so directional. That's very sort of technical, but that's where kind of the bare bones of math and science live. And something that I think is really fun that totally connects to it in the Engine is that she, her big, she wants to program this machine that Charles Babbage has created, and she thinks she can program it to make music. And here we're sitting in 2022, and I'm using a computer to write music. Like all of the instruments that I use in the show are completely software instruments. I don't play. There's no real instruments in the show, and that there's something about. I think we had a production meeting, and I got a little emotional because I was like, she wants to program this machine to make music, and that's how I'm making. Like I'm using a computer to make music for the show, so we did it.
It's kind of like it came full circle. Her goal came full circle because so many composers and things now are stuck with using their computers to officially compose and put their music on paper rather than handwriting all of the notes and things like that. So her dream did come true in a way.
Yeah. And I mean, software instruments are used widely. I mean, there's a company called Spitfire that works closely with, I believe it's Hans Zimmer, because when he does mock-ups of his scores, he wants them to sound really good. And so they're like very good sounding software instruments. They sound real, but I mean, it's so widely used now that you're exactly right. You don't have to sit and handwrite it anymore.
It kind of reminds me when I took my film music class, we did learn about that with Hans Zimmer, where he designed these digital instruments so you can't tell whether or not it's a actual live orchestra that he recorded or if it's a digitized orchestra, because you probably know so many digitized instruments, especially on things like Finale and Sibelius, especially string instruments in particular, are really bad.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting to see how Ada's dream has kind of like slowly evolved, and as technology gets better and better, it'll become more realistic, like more realized. And too bad she's not here to see it.
I know, wouldn't that be wonderful? Isn't it? Like, it's kind of some of the beauty about getting to do the play, which is like, of course, Megan is not really Ada Lovelace, but she plays her wonderfully, and it's kind of it's just such a fun way to sort of,
Mhm.
you know, explore what it would be like if she could see what she made, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So, speaking of how women have kind of shaped the STEAM as it's known now, because we do include the arts in that, because without the arts,
Yes.
there wouldn't be innovation. So, who is your favorite female STEAM role model and why?
I think, I mean, it's gonna sound very cheesy, but Ada Lovelace is one of them. But Ada Lovelace and like Hedy Lamarr, who created the technology that would eventually become Bluetooth, right? Um, because I think it's so incredible that, you know, can you? I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to think of something that doesn't exist and then think of, I just can't imagine what I think that's just so amazing that, you know, it's Ada, like I said, Ada Lovelace invented computer programming before there was a computer to program. Like Charles Babbage just never built his machines, and she still figured out how to make them work. And that's how we do computer programming. We still do computer programming with ones and zeros and ons and on. Like that's how we still do it. That's the basis of all of it, you know. And Hedy Lamarr, even more, like she was an actress and she just was bored and would tinker, and she figured out how to make, you know, wireless radio technology that became Bluetooth that was used by the military. You know what I mean? And it just didn't exist before, and she just said, I'll just play around with this and see what happens in between my busy acting career, you know?
It's the amount of creativity that's just so awe-inspiring that these women have. Like, we're both creatives, but they take that to a new level, and I think that's what makes them a great role model, because like you said, taking something that doesn't exist yet, but they have that idea to make it exist, is in like insane talent and insane tech, like creativity. I could never imagine doing something like that, even though I hope I might have an idea like that one day. But it's it's just very awe-inspiring, like I said.
Yeah, and in particular, in, you know, in a world where women gained access by getting married and you know what I mean, in a world where women did not have their own access, even if they had money and had access, you know, like Ada Lovelace couldn't have been Ada Lovelace if she had not gotten married. But, you know, like, right, she had to get married to somebody of import to have that kind of access to the world. And you know, it's I don't know, it's amazing. It's like when you, it's amazing to think about not only creating something that didn't exist and now like everybody uses it and it's how the world works, but also that it was made by women who like don't, you know, it just was made by women who were like, well, this is what women are supposed to do because this is what society says, you know. And I don't know, maybe the key is being, you know, you can't go work and you have to stay home and learn how to do a bunch of things. And Ada said, I guess I will learn how to do everything. So